Hey.
Hi, Robert. Nice to hear from you. You're there,
Great
right?
to hear.
All right,
Yes,
Robert,
sir.
let me continue with Judy. And don't be insulted. Worst comes to worst, I'll have you back next week. All right? But comment when you feel like it. Look, between us, a very energetic lady, and I'm going to calm her down, and we're going to do this story. Is that okay with you?
It's fine. Do you want me to listen in or what?
No, don't
I
go
want you
away.
to participate.
Don't go
away. This is Judy here, Robert.
And Judy's a perfect interview. Yeah.
No, Robert knows a lot of stuff, too, and he could sometimes explain things that what I try to explain
Robert,
ends up getting scrambled.
Things when you feel like it. My next point. Now, this is the interview with Jim Nanjo. He's a pilot. You're saying of the H-bomb attack force. Nonetheless, the klaxons chimed at 2 a.m., no later than 4 a.m. California time, and Israel did not attack the Liberty until minimum an hour later. In other words, how would Johnson be able to anticipate the attack? All right, go to it.
Well, Robert knows a lot about this, too. It's absolutely important that before the attack...
You can do it.
Well before the attack
occurred... What did that mean,
that
before the attack?
Before the attack, hours before the attack, these pilots were hauled out of bed in the middle of the night to prepare for a mission that they knew would contain, at least according to Nanjo, thermonuclear devices.
Yep.
And
that's a big deal.
Nanjo also knew that other bases in the U.S. were on a similar alert. The pilots were hauled out of bed in the middle of the night, and ditto for bases in Spain and Britain and Malta. That is what we do know.
All right. You did very well, Judy. That's an important piece of information that JFK knew before the attack.
LBJ.
Oh, I'm sorry, LBJ knew before the attack it was coming. That's a major piece of information.
That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, it's huge, and also after the attack had occurred, the Liberty did not say who was attacking them. They just said, we're under attack by air and sea, request since assisted. And then Lyndon Johnson gets on the phone or the radio with the Sixth Fleet commander and says, I want that blankety-blank ship at the bottom of the sea.
Yeah.
We will not embarrass an ally. Okay, so how did Lyndon Johnson know, before anybody else knew in the whole world, that it was Israel who was attacking the American ship as opposed to Russia or Syria or
How did he know
Egypt?
the ship was going to be attacked? All right?
Hello? That is a big $1 million question. How did he know?
And so, and we've talked about this before, Barry and Judy. Many people who were on the Liberty just cannot, for years and decades, could not accept that their own commander-in-chief was trying to blow them up, bomb them, napalm them, and drown them, and machine gun them, and put them at the bottom of the sea. So they would project all their anger purely on Israel. But Israel would never have done this on their own.
No, and we'll get to that. Oh, so nice to hear this calming voice of Robert. Boy. All right, now I'm going on to this report. And don't be shy. You can comment, but I want Judy to comment. Now, next, boo-boo here. Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin visited Ben-Gurion. Rabin wasn't the Israeli Prime Minister in the Six-Day War. It was Levi Eshkol. This whole paragraph is wrong. All of it. The whole thing is wrong.
Well, I will go back and check it because I may have gotten that from
you don't have to check it, okay?
Well, no. If I have a post, I want to make sure it's accurate because I want to find out if it's true that Ben-Gurion did oppose the attack on Israel.
Ben-Gurion tried to bring down No.
Well, we don't have to worry.
Calm down.
Let's focus on USS Liberty, Barry.
No,
There's
this is something... Oh, Robert, help me here. I need your
Barry,
voice,
there's something
Robert.
very important that I think you would love to discuss, okay? Because it's the timeline is probably one of the most interesting things because it's documented that at 10 o'clock in the morning, and the attack didn't occur till, 1 o'clock in the afternoon?
2 o'clock.
Israeli planes, they were just flying around. They saw it, and they reported back that there was a U.S. ship there. And then at 10:55, this guy's name, Pincus Pinkasi, he was the Naval Liaison Officer. He reported back to Naval Headquarters in Israel, off El Al-Rash, that an electromagnetic audio surveillance ship of the U.S. Navy named Liberty, whose markings were GTR-5. So in the morning, Israel, the whole command of Israel, knew that this was a U.S. ship, that it was a spy ship. They knew all this hours before the attack.
But you also have to understand that the United States was sharing intelligence with Israel in the Six-Day War, and there's proof of that because there's certain aerial photos that Israel did not have the ability to make that Israel was given, and they gave it out to the media that only America could have given them. So it's a fantasy to think that the United States was spying on Israel or was some sort of a neutral in the Six-Day War. In reality, the Pentagon was coordinating it with Israel.
Well, one thing is for certain. Now, forget this political analysis I'm reading. It's an amateur at Israel. The fact of the matter is Moshe Dayan, and I'm going to repeat this, was an LBJ's, his pecker was in his pocket. He was blackmailed.
Okay.
So you think that Moshe Dayan was blackmailed?
Oh, hell yes. Why do you think in 73 he let the Syrians and the Egyptians, he gave them 24 hours to, yes, you know what, it's not for me to butt in right now. You bet he was blackmailed.
Okay, you would know a lot more about this than we would, Barry.
He almost destroyed the country in 73. Then he was defense minister. He pulled back troops. He let the Egyptians attack. He let the Syrians attack. The deal was Israel doesn't do a thing for 24 hours. The Syrians stuck to the agreement. They captured the Golan in the first day, right to the Jordan River, and stopped. They could have been in Tiberias that day. They played ball.
Right.
It's a very, yes, Ben-Gurion was in, his pecker anyways, was in LBJ's pocket.
Well, wouldn't you also agree that Israel had blackmail ability on Lyndon Johnson because he was the one orchestrating this whole insane plan?
Oh, it's beyond Johnson. 73, there was no Johnson anymore. He was long gone.
Yeah, Johnson died January of 73. He's out of office 4 years.
I was going to say, he croaked in 73. He was out of office in, 68?
But what I mean, wouldn't these people have blackmail ability on the United States saying, oh, by the way, your president told us to kill 300 of your American sailors?
Probably.
In 1960.
On the other hand, they had better blackmail. Don't forget, in 67, you're talking about Israel taking Jerusalem. You would think they'd want to keep Jerusalem, right? They hand over the holiest of holies to the Waqf, to the Jordanian Waqf. Immediately, Dayan hands them sovereignty over the holiest part of Jerusalem. You think that was their idea? Well,
Israeli politics and Middle East politics and that whole thing is a completely, so we can debate that from now to doomsday. I've even done blog posts on that. But on the USS Liberty, I think there are some key points. Now, Robert, Barry believes that it was a false flag attack, okay?
Yeah, well, that's what it is.
No doubt about that. We all start with that. The question, once again, was it
But Barry isn't convinced that LBJ was going to nuke Cairo and that all those planes took off to start a nuclear war in the Middle East. I mean,
You have to understand that Lyndon Johnson was a lunatic. And when you understand that, then everything else makes perfect sense. The reason we heard about the nuclear payload-loaded airplanes going to Cairo and being turned around was because Admiral Martin told it to a USS Liberty survivor a few days after the attack. He said, we sent nuclear-loaded airplanes heading to Cairo. They turned around within 3 minutes of the city and had to land in Greece because nuclear payload airplanes cannot land back on a aircraft carrier. It's too risky. They have to land on ground, so they went to Greece.
And that's a very important. That was that guy Mo Schaefer who was on that that ship with Admiral Martin. And that was the
Admiral Martin
ship
told it to Mo Schaefer as he was recuperating on another ship. He said, not only did Admiral Martin tell me that 4 jets were on the way to the Liberty with conventional weapons and were called, he said that 4 were on their way to Cairo loaded with nuclear weapons. He said they were 3 minutes from bombing the Egyptians. He also said the jets could not land on the carrier with nuclear arms. They had to land in Athens. He stated this from my bedside while on the Little Rock, that's the code name of the flagship, after the attack. He said, Lyndon Johnson had sent planes with nuclear payloads to bomb Cairo, and they were turned around 3 minutes before World War III was to begin.
And anyway, that's a quote by Hunan right out of his book Operation Cyanide, and then the USS this Mo Schaefer was flown to the USS Davis. They were flown with several different ships, and the USS Davis was the flagship of the U.S. Sixth Fleet.
And
Admiral Martin was a big dude. I mean, he was in charge of the whole U.S. Sixth Fleet.
Yes, Admiral Martin was a huge dude. He was the Sixth Fleet commander. But then we get back to why in the world would Lyndon Johnson bomb Israel? Okay, not Israel.
Not Israel,
Cairo.
Okay, because he's a lunatic. Okay, and I'm going to quote you, George Bundy.
Could he get away with lunacy?
You can't get lunacy. Suddenly expands the possibility of what can occur. Okay. And so here's what George Bundy said about LBJ 4 years later. He's talking to Arthur Schlesinger, who printed this in his memoirs. It took 30 years for this to come out, okay? Schlesinger says, I was having dinner with Bundy, 1971. He said he remarked that he had read Nikita Khrushchev's account of what it was like to work with Joseph Stalin. And Schlesinger remarked that it reminded him of Adolf Hitler. And Bundy's reply was, well, when I read Khrushchev, I was reminded of something else in addition, my last days in the White House with LBJ. But George Bundy's last time in the White House was during the USS Liberty crisis. Okay?
All right. I always
He's comparing him to Joseph Stalin. Dangerous,
that's pretty
crazy,
dangerous. I mean, that's total
tyrannical,
sociopath, mass murdering nut job.
A reckless, psychopathic killer.
Well, yeah, and the story told by Mo Schaefer about Admiral Martin confirming the U.S. plan to nuke Cairo is also a story that is validated by Air Force pilot Jim Nanjo in California, and who was a member of the H-bomb task force.
Like why is the Strategic Air Command going on high nuclear alert at a minimum 1 hour before the attack on Liberty? They're probably on high alert 2 hours before the attack on the Liberty. But that's neither here nor there.
Nanjo didn't know that Cairo was the target. He didn't know.
Right.
He could never understand why he was caught out of bed in the middle of the night.
It could have been Russia.
Before the U.S.
But here's the key thing, Judy, and Barry. On that day, the Russians got on the nuclear hotline, which is really like a teletype machine and not really a phone, 3 times that day to talk to LBJ. Okay, that is a very rarely used emergency hotline. God knows what they were really telling the guy. There were probably all kinds of threats exchanged on that thing. Like,
and we don't know what that message was, do we, Robert?
We don't.
To this day.
But we do know that 2 weeks after the Six-Day War, because the United States and Russia had come so close to nuclear war yet again, okay, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, cooler heads in both countries felt it important that the countries get together, and they met in New Jersey at the Glassboro Conference. That was just really a sound check to make sure that both sides were not insane.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, it's so fascinating. I think another. I mean, there are several incredible pieces, like LBJ saying, "We will not embarrass an ally." After just learning that the U.S. Liberty was attacked, and it never said who attacked them, they just said they're under attack by an unidentified.
Yeah, how did he know that? How did LBJ know that within 45 minutes or an hour of the attack, when nobody else knew what country was bombing the Liberty, yet LBJ knew? He knew an ally was doing it.
Yeah,
Why?
and I would think that Admiral Martin of the USS Davis, the flagship of the entire U.S. Sixth Fleet, is not a lunatic basket case. He knew what the mission was because he was the one that confirmed that those planes that took off with thermonuclear payloads, that we do know, had to land in Greece or on land someplace because the Navy would not allow a nuclear-armed plane to come back on the aircraft carrier. That was their rule.
Too dangerous.
So, yeah, it's too dangerous. It's just too risky.
But
so
it's okay
there's
to blow
so many things.
Athens.
Athens, Greece.
You can blow that up, but you can't blow up a ship.
Well, no, you don't want to fly off the end of a ship and then have to have somebody come and trying to fish
there are
a
ways
nuclear...
to prevent a bomb from going off, even if you do. But all right. So Greece agreed. They were in on this somehow. They accepted that.
Well, no, they just said you can land your airplane here. That's all they were in on. Yes, you can land your airplanes here.
The Greeks are nuts anyway. I mean, the country's just bankrupt now anyway.
Okay, the Greeks are nuts.
Well, it's the cradle of civilization. What can I say? But that is a very important part of the story. Admiral Martin, who on the USS Davis, which was the flagship of the entire U.S. Sixth Fleet, confirmed that they were within 3 minutes of nuking Cairo. And Jim Nanjo, he pretty much backed up the story because he knew he was off to carry a thermonuclear device hours before the USS Liberty was struck. So he never knew that Cairo was the target. That's what he told, Hunan. But he knew something big was up. At that point, they all did. So.
And here's another red flag on the USS Liberty, which is very unusual. And it was the ferocity in which Israel was not just attacking a ship, but trying to kill everybody on it. Not just disable a ship that had like a 50 caliber machine gun as its mode of protection, but literally they were bombing it from above, torpedoing it, napalming it, machine gunning life rafts. I mean, who does that? Machine gunning a life raft. If the ship is disabled and they're going off into a life raft, that's a war crime right there. Why the emphasis on killing everybody there? Well, because they were going to have the Liberty sink, have no survivors, and then blame it on Egypt. And by the way, there was a U.S. submarine, very likely there, called the U.S. Amberjack, that was watching the whole attack. It was also possibly a threat to sink the Liberty.
Well, I want you to know I was in steady contact with Liberty officers. One is actually in Judy's report. I recognize his name immediately. Now, she's got this very optimistic conclusion that they're finally seeing that after analyzing their own research, that no other conclusion could be drawn, that they're coming around to understanding it was an American operation. By the way, I never saw that. They really despised Israel, and nobody blamed themselves, all right?
Well, I would disagree because I've been talking to several of them over Facebook and everything. And when I post that LBJ did it, maybe not everybody agrees with me, but a significant amount of them agree with me that the Americans were involved in it. Yeah, it's changing, definitely.
Barry, did you know that Israeli diplomat Epi Ebron?
What about Epi?
Well, he was the one that supposedly recalled a meeting he had with LBJ on May 26th, 1967, because Hunan interviewed him, and he said, "This is exactly what Epi said. But you and I, the two most powerful people in Washington, are going to get Congress to pass another Tonkin resolution." He was bitching to Epi. He says, "I, Lyndon Johnson, have to get congressional approval if I want to act as President of the United States. I'm just a 6'4" Texas friend of Israel." And he was bitching to Epi, and Epi wrote this in an autobiography or in subsequent reports that he told Epi, "You and I are going to get our Tonkin resolution."
And he had to conjure up a false flag attack to do that.
Yeah,
and that was
it's a minor witness, this one. But what is of interest to me is the conclusion of this article that, well, here's a quote straight from the article, that Israel cannot realistically refuse the U.S. anything, which is why Israel is constantly upping its relationship with the U.S. In 1967, the Israeli military was European. They had Mirage jets from France. They had German torpedoes. They didn't use American. Well, look, the 67 war brought America in big time, and this may be true after the Six-Day War. It was not true when the Liberty was bombed. It was European equipment, not American.
And you know what? That's very important, Barry, because I did not know that, because here in the good old USA, we just view Israel as America's 51st state and has always been our 51st state. So you're telling me, and this is something I didn't know, that Israel was not necessarily a U.S. lackey back then.
It was European in those days. Now, the Six-Day War, whatever its intention, certainly ousted the Europeans, and Mirages became Phantoms. You had a different military after that. But during the Six-Day War, it was European and not American at all.
How many arms packages did LBJ give Israel, and when did he give them to them?
After the war. If anything,
I think that the Israel got. I was reading somewhere, and I can't document it, that Israel got an arms package before the Six-Day War, like in '65 even.
No.
So,
in 74, the Americans gave Israel $3.3 billion. For the first time, they went nuts giving Israel money. But they also gave the Egyptians in 79 about the same thing for signing an agreement where Israel handed back the Sinai to Sadat. It gets messy. America...
here we go. There's a book out, Lyndon B. Johnson, The Politics of Arms Sales to Israel in the Shadow of the Hawk. Okay, it's by Abraham Ben Zevi, Z-V-I. Came out in 2004.
Abraham Ben Zvi. All right, okay.
Okay, Abraham Ben Zvi. Okay, hold on. It talks about, on the Amazon description, it says this book seeks to reconstruct and elucidate the processes behind the decisions made by the Johnson administration during the years 1965 to 68 to sell Israel M48 tanks, A4 Skyhawk planes, and F4 Phantom planes, like you were talking about.
Right. After the Six-Day War, we got these great Phantoms and the Mirages. Well, Israel had its own Mirage. They copied it. It was called the Kfir. It was not... Once the Phantoms, and by the way, after that, the F-15s and the F-16s, Israel became an American military. Folks, we have to take 3 minutes off. I'm so glad you're here, Robert. We're sorting out the mess, and you're
fun.
You're offering balance and sanity. You're doing a fine job. I'll see you both in 3 minutes. We'll plug each other, and then we'll get to the bottom of all this if it's possible. See you in 3, folks.
years ahead of the dominant media. FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the left behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Hey folks, it's Barry Chamish. Lively tonight. Boy, oh boy, is it lively. We're on to the Liberty. We've got two very knowledgeable guests, but first you get all my books at lulu.com. That's www.lulu.com. You'll see a search box right in my last name, Chamish. Chamish. I have a website, barrychamish.com. My latest article, which between us, I consider it maybe my most important. Nonetheless, it's not on the site, and we'll try and get it up as best we can. Now, by the way, Robert, your turn. Plug yourself.
Oh, well, I'll be having a book coming out this fall with Roger Stone. It's called The Clintons' War on Women. It'll be published by Skyhorse, and it'll be a very informative book on Hillary Clinton and her abuse of women and Bill's participation as well.
Oh, Robert, next week we'll put you on the show. I studied that, but it's inappropriate. This week,
yeah, I just wanted to. You asked me what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing now.
No. We'll give you next.
Quick question
week.
for Judy. What was the day of that meeting between LBJ and the Israeli ambassador? Was it May 25th of '67?
I've got it here. I think it was May 26th of '67. It was only a week before. 10 days before the attack. Here it is. An Israeli diplomat, Epi Evron, recalled a meeting he had with LBJ on 5/26, as documented by Hunan. And Hunan, this is a quote from Hunan. Then he went on to say, I, Lyndon Johnson, have to get congressional approval if I want to act as president of the United States. Otherwise, I'm just a 6'4" Texan friend of Israel.
And that's not a great quote.
That description stuck in my memory. But
it's
you
not
and
a great quote. Let's go back to the real stuff. What your article is saying is that LBJ want to reorder the world, all right, and create a nuclear war to feed this ambition. Now, we start with that, and we'll talk about why it's still covered up to this day, this version of things. But let's start. He wanted to reorder the world. By the way, I can see that. I can see the 6-day war, American troops landing in Egypt, out goes Nasser. I'm going to add one thing. Peter sat on my sofa. I never realized
you mean author Peter Hunan of Operation Sonnet. Go ahead. Yep.
Now, when I was with Peter, I didn't realize my sofa had such interesting people. This is in retrospect. I told him that. Now, I told him this is speculation, but I'll bet you it's true. Nasser died age 51. I believe it was shortly after the 6-day war, and Sadat took over. Nonetheless, I said, you don't die at 51. You get murdered at 51. And he said to me, yep, that's what the Arabs think. That's all.
Just a side. It's possible.
All right, no comment. I guess it wasn't such a good observation.
Well, I'm trying to find out I'm on the LBJ Library website right now. I'm looking at the daily diary of LBJ. I'm trying to find that meeting because he had an off-the-record meeting with the ambassador from Israel on one night. They noted the meeting, and they said it was off the record. So.
All right.
Well, anyway, Barry, I'd like to clarify one point. You did quote me, and my quote was, Israel is dependent on the U.S. for foreign aid, and as an ally, Israel's goals and national interests do, in fact, collide with the U.S. However, just before that sentence, I also said it's entirely possible that the Israelis thwarted LBJ and his draconian plans, and it's also true that the Israelis played along with the U.S., but only to the extent that it could maneuver something out of it for Israel. That's why I think that is critical in the timeline, because maybe after the U.S.'s liberty, the 6-day war, all that's when a strong alliance between Israel and the U.S. was like permanently fortified.
I guess so.
I just don't know.
All right, let's go back to the reordering of the world, and that means attacking Egypt, getting Nasser and his pro-Soviet government out, and getting, essentially, by the way, after they murdered Nasser, that's my claim, by the way, Sadat played along with peace and Israel played along and walked out of the Sinai. And in short, a very different diplomacy took over after Nasser died at age 51.
Well, another thing is that, I believe that Nasser was, he was clearly assassinated by his own people for signing that peace agreement, and the peace agreement also resulted in massive foreign aid to Jordan, to Israel, to Egypt.
What peace agreement?
There was a peace agreement that had been signed.
Nasser never signed it.
Sadat, you mean?
Oh, Sadat was.
Anwar Sadat was assassinated because of the peace agreement.
Yeah, and that's when all this foreign aid started to really flow. And I got to check and find out what year that was. But once a peace agreement was signed, a lot of foreign aid, U.S. foreign aid, went to Israel. And I think also behind it is U.S. defense contractors wanted that business. And since you had previously mentioned that it was going to Europeans, it could be that U.S. defense contractors wanted control so they could have, all the business for all the arms in the area. And we gave the Egyptians billions, we gave the Jordanians billions, we gave the Israelis billions, and God knows we gave Yasser Arafat and the Palestinians billions. I don't think much ever came of the peace treaty, but everybody took the money.
Right.
That was the intent of sinking the Liberty. That was the ultimate intent, to buy the Middle East. You know, the Middle East is a very unhappy place right now.
Yep.
It's always been unhappy. I've never known the place to be happy and peaceful, at least not in the observations during my lifetime. But I do believe.
I think what you have now is the makings of a whopper of a war. That's what I think is coming up. All right.
Well, we can discuss that another time, because I think you have huge Islamic problems over there. You've got Muslim Brotherhood. You got reformists. You've got Sunnis. You got Shiites. You got Alawites. You got Druzis. But that's another story for another day. And those people are all feuding with each other.
You always had that. It was stirred up. ISIS was created by the United States in Jordan with Israeli officers in the year 2011.
And I believe that. I absolutely believe that ISIS was created by the U.S. And I would like to find out, there is something sinister between the Saudi and the Israeli alliance. I don't understand it, but somehow Israel always seems to be siding with Saudi Arabia and their form of
they hate the Shiites. They hate the Shiites. They hate Iran, both of them, and they hate Assad. Both of them, I think, were against Saddam Hussein. Actually, I think that Netanyahu was against Saddam Hussein, but Saudi Arabia did not favor the war. They wanted a buffer between them and Iran.
Well, that was the stupidest war, but we have to have another show on that, because the Sunnis were in charge, so they controlled Iraqi oil. Now, George W. Bush goes and invades it, and it was a 2/3 Shiite majority, and turns the whole country over to the Shiites, and, you got the Shiites and the Kurds, and the Sunnis all waging battles against one another over there, but that's getting away from the USS
All
Liberty.
right, then let's go back to it. Why is the Liberty covered up? And by the way, who's covering it up? What we're talking about is an alternative.
Okay. Who's covering it up? Okay.
Yeah.
The U.S. government is, and the Israeli government is, and the major media is, and the mainstream scholarship is. And here's why.
Well, that's who's doing it. Who's getting away with it?
Who's getting away with it? I mean, the perpetrators are mostly dead now. I mean, I'm sure LBJ died in 1973. Moshe Dayan died, I don't know what year. The leaders of Israel at that time are not alive anymore. But the reason it's covered up...
One is...
Which one is?
Shimon Peres is alive, and this criminal is still influencing all kinds of baloney.
Shimon Peres is still around.
Shimon Peres, okay.
But because Barry and Judy, the truth and liberty is so ugly, it's so discrediting to both the Lyndon Johnson, to the United States, and to Israel, and to the U.S.-Israeli relationship. Because there are a lot of people who do not like how close Israel and the USA are aligned. Happen to be one of them. I kind of think Israel tells USA what to do. And if you have a U.S. president who is so crazy, so maniacal, so whatever, that he's going to kill a ship of 294 Americans just so the USA can have a false flag attack and blame Egypt and go in there and then take over the Middle East, that looks pretty bad.
Well, and that's the key point that Barry keeps raising. Why? Why nuke Cairo? And what is the U.S.? What are U.S. interests?
Well, Egypt is the linchpin of the Middle East. You control Egypt. You suddenly have huge influence over all those other countries around there.
That's one view. I tend to think that, it's more complicated and that the Saudis kind of rule. But and that ties into the Sunni Shia rift, and that's another huge problem. But and some people have speculated, and it's also in Hunan's book, that LBJ wanted a big war so he could win re-election, and he was in danger of not only not getting re-elected, but even losing the Democratic primary. That would have been morbidly horrifying for him. I mean, and he believes, like so many other people, you got to be a big war hero, you know. And
LBJ's polling numbers went up after the 6 Day War. After Israel did so well, his polling numbers, in fact, did go up.
Also, there could be some truth to the fact that the U.S. what's behind that 6 Day War, and I cover that in my piece somewhere. Now, Barry seems to think that it's not really true that the 6 Day War was, while it was a preemptive attack, Israel had sound justification for doing it because they were acutely threatened. They were under an economic blockade.
Get a piece of cake into the country. It was the airport was blockaded. Everything was blockaded. Look, don't go into it. You're just not an expert on Israel.
Actually, I want you to tell us this again, Barry. Tell us what prompted Israel to do a preemptive attack. I know that the Egyptians were massing tanks and soldiers on the Sinai Peninsula.
Israel was being choked. You couldn't get anything in. You couldn't get out. It was listen, the lead up to the 6 Day War was not preemptive. It was that the Arabs were coming to crush Israel. And all of this is just not...
Let me ask you something. Was that over the blockade of, what was it, the Gulf of Aqaba?
Aqaba. It's Iran, actually. It was also blockaded. The country was blockaded north, south, east, west. The armies were all about to crush Israel. That's why the preemptive strike took place. It's not something that came out of nowhere.
It's not like the USA did not know about this. USA was sharing intelligence with Israel, and the rest of the Middle East assumed that America was coordinating the 6 Day War of Israel, and I think that is in hindsight, they were correct.
You know what? In a kind of devious way, that's probably right. All right. Without diving into why, I think I'll agree with you there.
Okay.
Okay.
Because the feigned neutrality was a sham, and everybody in the Middle East knew it, from Israel to their neighbors.
Well, I think you're forgetting something else. It wasn't just Egypt under a Soviet alliance. The Syrians were controlled by the Soviets.
Right.
It was a great... all right, away we go.
But all that went away after the Soviet Union collapsed, so a lot of people like Cuba...
No, it went away after the 6 Day War, and Israel took over the Golan Heights. It did not go away when the Soviets collapsed in, 90-something. It made no difference to Egypt or Syria. They were not... Well, Egypt was effectively American by then. And as for Syria, well, you know the state of Syria today.
Pretty sad, the state of Syria today. I've got some neighbors in my neighborhood who are from Syria.
Well, it's divided in two, and
they said they're all refugees now. All their families are refugees.
Yep.
Well, what Westerners don't understand about the Middle East is that it's so damn tribal. It still is. They have tribal allegiances, whether it's, the Alawites or the Druze or the Sunni or the Shia. It's kind of strange to figure out because they don't tend to function as most modern nation states.
Look, that's all been stirred up during the Ottoman. What's all been stirred up? There was never this kind of deep breakdown of their societies and nations. All right, now you got it.
Right.
Well, okay, but when we get back to it, I think the one thing that Robert and I have discussed is that, what LBJ did was horrifying. It was terrible, but I still have a hard time figuring out what is the U.S. interest in all of this,
To control
besides
Egypt.
To control Egypt. Okay. That's it.
And so for folks who doubt,
there's no way a Western infidel country is going to ever control a country that's 99% Muslim. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah,
well,
it is. All right. Look, the fact is, you had an operation. Now, again, Egypt wouldn't have got the full blame. Russia somehow would have been blamed as well. Egypt is not going to sink to liberty.
Right.
You had a broader scheme at work here.
I absolutely agree. And that's when you get into the broader scheme, you get into what I call deep politics or deep geopolitics, and you get all kinds of crazy things that come into play, which is, why this stuff is so fascinating, because frequently there's not one simple, clear-cut answer to anything. It's like crap happens, and you don't understand why, and it's, sometimes a crazy quilt of crazy reasons that make things happen that make no sense and end up killing people and tearing countries apart, and that's not good. But anyway, back to the USS Liberty and how dangerous LBJ was. He was crazy enough to do it. I think Robert and I and you, Barry, both agree that he is culpable and that he did give the order to sink the USS Liberty. And I think we also agree,
most definitely,
based on and I recommend that everybody do read Hunan's book.
It's called Peter Hunan.
Cyanide.
Yep.
Why the bombing of the USS Liberty nearly caused World War III by Peter Hunan, H-O-U-N-A-M, is an absolute must-read book because it just clarifies a lot of things. It documents a lot. He did a lot of research. He put a lot of work into it. He apparently got a lot of information from Barry, who knew a lot about it. And Hunan really did a first-class investigative journalist job on this project. And I admire his work, and I absolutely believe it. So,
and if it weren't for certain Israeli pilots dumping their ordnance in the water, the Liberty would have sunk for sure. If that pilot who disobeyed his orders, who kept being told to sink an American ship, who refused to do it, who started dumping his bombs in the water, the same guy flew back to Tel Aviv and was arrested on the tarmac. He could have killed the rest of the Liberty, but he didn't. So God bless him.
And God bless him. And what happened to that guy after the Israelis arrested him for obviously military insubordination?
You tell us, Barry. You're the one who found him.
I don't know. It's been so many years.
It's a critical story. It's a critical story because there you have an Israeli pilot who is not an insane person, okay, who's being given insane orders by the IDF, who's being given an insane plan by Lyndon Johnson, and he breaks the chain in the middle of battle. Okay, if he would have kept dropping his bombs, there would not have been a need to torpedo the USS Liberty. It would have sunk.
Well, let me ask you this, Robert. Considering the firepower of the Israeli Air Force and the Israeli Navy, I mean, they could have sunk the Liberty within minutes. Would you agree?
You get people like that pilot who were rebelling in real time.
I know,
saying it's an American ship.
If they followed their orders, they could have sunk it within minutes because all the USS Liberty survivors, they all agree that it went on for an hour and 15 minutes, I think. Some think it was more. So I'm thinking the Israelis could have sunk this thing in 2 or 3 minutes. Instead, this thing drags on for an hour and 15 minutes.
And the only defense that this ship had was, what, a 50-caliber machine gun, and that's it?
It's a couple of them, which were knocked out during the first attack.
And they were knocked out. After the first attack, it was completely defenseless at that point. At that point, they had handguns, slingshots.
It was effectively defenseless and unarmed, and the Israelis knew that. So when you go back to the timeline and you review the flyovers by Israeli pilots, before the attack, and they said, this is an American ship out there. An hour later, another Israeli pilot, I named him in there, he goes back and he reports it's an electromagnetic, blah, 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 the official name for a U.S. spy ship with a big American flag on it. They knew that hours before the attack. I mean, the attack was around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean,
2 o'clock, 1:58.
2 o'clock. Well, one report came in at 10 a.m. Another report came in at like 10:55, 11 o'clock. They knew they had
They were constantly surveilling. They had 13 overflights of the USS Liberty at various times before the attack.
And they knew what it was.
In some cases, the pilots were so close to the Liberty they could see the face of the Israeli pilots who were doing the surveillance of the Liberty.
And, you know, that's another critical point. Because the Israeli pilots were doing so many flyovers, these aren't the people that were sent out to attack it. These are just routine, flyover missions. They were just flying around like they do. That's why they weren't alarmed, because the USS Liberty crew was used to seeing the planes there. And as you said,
Israeli planes,
the Israeli flights. And they were so close that they could see the faces of the pilots.
But in reality, they were being set up. They were being set up like a wounded duck in the middle of nowhere. And then you had two miracles that you like to talk about, Judy. The first miracle is that the Liberty somehow miraculously got off its emergency flash bulletin SOS. And the other miracle was that somehow after a direct torpedo hit, it still did not sink.
It still did not sink?
It's a double miracle.
Oh, exactly, and then it was pummeled by, it had something like 900 and some machine guns. And the Israeli torpedo boats, now, this is where I forgot. I got to go back and check on this. What was the big hit? Was it a torpedo from an Israeli torpedo ship, or was it a bomb from an Israeli plane?
Israeli torpedo ship did tremendous damage, and it's a miracle the Liberty that did not sink the Liberty. That's the miracle about it.
It was nowhere near
I think there were 4 of those out there, and they had enough firepower and enough torpedoes. They could have just kept firing away to sink it. I mean, I think the first
they were counting up the hole.
Not in a sensitive enough area to sink the ship. All right, just in that one torpedo in the wrong spot was not going to sink the Liberty. A couple of good missiles from your jets would have done the job.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and the pilots quit dropping those halfway through because it was an American ship, and they were being told to do crazy things by their leaders.
Well, as I say, the big point, and I don't know if it's accurate, but there was an order rescinded from the Saratoga to rescue the Liberty. They were ordered not to.
That's Lyndon Johnson calling the jets back.
Yep.
At least twice.
And then the admiral could not believe that, and can I speak to my superior? And that's when LBJ got on the phone with Admiral Geis and said, I want that GD ship sank. LBJ used the word GD a lot, and he says, I will not embarrass an ally.
All right, Robert. Thank you both. This was very lively, and Robert, it was good you came aboard. It added balance.
We had a great time.
New book.
I would love the truth to get out, Barry. I just want the truth to get out, not the USS Liberty. That's my goal.
My little truth got out. All right, my little show did our best. All right, thank you both, Robert. We'll have you on next week, and we'll talk about
have a great day. Bye-bye.
And all that.
All right, fantastic.
Good night, all, and good night, folks. This has been Barry Chamish. We'll see you next Tuesday. Bye.
If you'd like to get a copy of this program, you may subscribe at FirstAmendmentRadio.com for only $45 a month, and you'll receive an MP3 CD weekly of all of our programs. As a bonus, we'll send you a password for our audio archives online. That's a $15 value. Or you may request any month of any program on one MP3 CD for a minimum donation of only $25, or any single program on tape, MP3 CD, or CD for only $15. You may do all of this online at FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Just follow the instructions to make a donation or subscribe. You may also adopt an hour of your favorite program Please don't forget that most of the programs on FirstAmendmentRadio.com are listener-supported. Don't do Internet? Then call 559-781-3773 and we'll be honored to help you. Thank you from all of us here at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
I pledge allegiance to the King of Kings and to his kingdom come,